Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @symbol CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION @symbol CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 11th of December 2025, from the news section. Angela Constance faces no confidence vote next week. Article written by political editor Andrew Learmonth. Labour and the Tories have both tabled motions of no confidence in Angela Constance after the Justice Secretary misrepresented Professor Alexis Jay on grooming gangs. That could see MSPs vote on the Minister's future next week before Parliament breaks up for recess. While the Lib Dems have said they will back the motion of no confidence, the Scottish Greens have said they will vote against. That should mean the Minister survives the vote relatively easily. Scottish Labour leader Anna Sawar confirmed he had lodged a motion of no confidence in Ms Constance on Thursday morning, saying it was clear she had misrepresented the former chair of the UK's independent inquiry into child sex abuse and misled Holyrood. At First Minister's questions, Scottish Tory leader Russell Finlay said his party would give Parliament the chance to have its say with a vote of no confidence if John Swinney refused to sack his minister, accusing Ms Constance of having twisted Professor Jay's word to block a Scottish grooming gangs inquiry. The move comes after the Herald revealed that Professor Jay was forced to press the Scottish Government privately to set the record straight for a second time after Ms Constance continued to insist publicly that she had accurately quoted the child abuse expert. The row stems back to September during Stage 3 of the Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Scotland Bill, when Ms Constance told MSPs that Professor Jay shares my view that there was no need for further inquiries into child sex abuse and exploitation and that it was time to just get on with it. However, in an email sent directly to the Justice Secretary days later, Professor Jay made clear that, while wording had been quoted correctly, the comments related to England and Wales in January in response to remarks by Elon Musk and had nothing to do with Mr Kerr's amendment or the position in Scotland. She stressed she had expressed no views on Tory MSP Liam Kerr's amendment, which sought to require the new Victim Commissioner to carry out research on grooming gangs and instead urged ministers to urgently take steps to establish reliable data about the nature and extent of child sexual exploitation by organised networks. After Professor Jay's intervention, officials quietly recorded a clarification in the minutes of the National Child Sex Abuse and Exploitation Strategic Group in October, stating her remarks were not related to the Scottish Bill debate or to Scotland's position. Despite that, Ms Constance later told the Herald, I gave an accurate quote, and indeed the correspondence Ms Jay sent me acknowledged the quote that I gave was accurate, insisting she had been making a general point about the need to get on with the job of protecting children. New Freedom of Information documents now show Professor Jay also regarded that position as unsatisfactory and pressed for her original letter to be published. The correspondence also shows the First Minister asked to speak to Professor Jay the following day. After that call, officials told her that decisions and next steps were moving at pace and indicated a ministerial statement was likely the following week. Professor Jay was also asked if she would agree to a private call with Ms Constance. She accepted, and that conversation took place on Monday, December the 1st. Separately, Education Secretary Jenny Gilruth requested an urgent discussion with Professor Jay the following day. At FMQs, Mr Finlay accused Ms Constance of having brazenly misrepresented a leading child abuse expert, in order to block a grooming gang inquiry in Scotland, and claimed she had broken the ministerial code by failing to correct the record in Parliament or apologise. He said grooming gang victims had been failed by the authorities and were now being failed again by this SNP government, adding, "If John Swinney will not sack the Justice Secretary, we will give Parliament the chance to have its say with a vote of no confidence." Mr Sarwar told MSPs, "It's clear that she misrepresented Professor Alexis Jay on an issue as serious as grooming gangs and misled this Parliament. She has had repeated opportunities to apologise and correct the record, but has failed to do so. And despite what John Swinney says, she has had repeated requests from Professor Jay to correct the record, but has failed to do so, and victims do not have confidence in her. It is now clear that she cannot stay in her position. She must resign, or John Swinney must sack her. The truth is that Angela Constance is not just a stranger to the truth, she's a stranger to competence as well," he added. Victims have also demanded Miss Constance's departure. Taylor, a survivor of a grooming gang, said, "Professor Alexis Jay has now confirmed what most of us already knew, that Angela Constance stood up and misled Parliament in response to Mr Kerr's amendment on grooming gangs in Scotland. Angela Constance must now resign, as it has now been exposed that she knowingly lied and has failed to return to Parliament to correct the record after many opportunities to do so." When asked by journalists if he had full confidence in Ms Constance as Justice Secretary, the First Minister said, "Yes." In the Chamber, Mr Swinney said the Justice Secretary was making a general comment on the situation when the MSPs debated the Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Bill. Ms Constance's remarks were a reflection of the general comments that were being made on the issues at that time, he added. The SNP leader went on to state the government is taking forward the essential work necessary to make a judgment about whether a separate grooming gangs inquiry is required. He said this is needed as his view expressed to ministers is that the evidence base is not sufficient to take such a decision at this time. He also said the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry, which the government established in 2015 to examine abuse in care settings, could also consider issues linked to grooming. The First Minister said that the government has established a statutory public inquiry that has the ability to examine issues in relation to grooming gangs. He stressed the government has to take care to make sure it properly respects the independent inquiry established by statute, which has the power to look at many of these issues. A spokesperson for the Scottish Greens said, "Protecting children from sexual abuse and securing justice for victims and survivors is our priority, as it should be for every MSP. The vote does neither of those, so we will not back it. Survivors deserve so much better than this being turned into a party political issue. A far better use of Parliament's time would be for the Justice Secretary to answer questions and make a statement announcing what additional steps the Scottish Government is taking to safeguard children. They could start by publishing the long-delayed guidance for schools to teach children how to stay safe from sexual harms." That article was written by Andrew Learmonth, political editor. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 11th of December 2025, from the news section. Sandy Peggy latest, lawyers to appeal NHS Fife judgment, by political correspondent Rebecca McCurdy. An emotional Sandy Peggy said she would not give up on her legal fight against NHS Fife, as he announced her intention to appeal the Employment Tribunal's judgment. The nurse made her first public speech since taking action against the Health Board in May 2024. Ms Peggy had a narrow victory when the tribunal judgment was published on Monday, with the Health Board found to have harassed the nurse on 4 accounts, including by failing to revoke Dr Upson's use of the female changing rooms until alternative rotas were arranged. However, her claims of victimisation and discrimination under the Equality Act 2010 failed, as did all claims against Dr Upton. Ms Peggy's solicitor Margaret Gribbon said work was already underway on the appeal, with a KC, Ben Cooper, appointed to support the case. Speaking at a press conference in Dundee, flanked by her family, friends and politicians, Ms Peggy said it was difficult to put into words how grateful I am to her solicitor and barristers, Naomi Cunningham and Charlotte Ells. Ms. Peggy said, "I am not a campaigner, and I have never heard of the phrase gender critical when I first raised complaints over 2 years ago about my employer's decision to allow men into female-only changing rooms. I just knew instinctively that it wasn't right, that women were expected to undress in front of men in private spaces, and I still believe this to be the case." She said she was delighted at the tribunal's finding that she had been harassed by NHS Fife, but added, "Their judgment, I believe, falls short in many respects, and this is why I certainly won't be giving up this legal fight anytime soon." Confirming the appeal, Ms. Gribbin said the Health Board had unlawfully harassed Sandy Peggy over a lengthy period of time in 2024, with some of the findings described as hugely problematic. Ms. Gribbin accused the Health Board of going a archaeological dig to find material to discredit her. She added, "It was even suggested to Sandy, by Fife Health Board KC during her cross-examination, that she lied about experiencing a menstrual flood on Christmas Eve 2023. So, against that background, it is difficult to envisage what women would contemplate raising a complaint of this nature." Ms. Gribbin continued, "I can confirm that the tribunal's judgment will be appealed, and work on this is already underway." NHS Fife acknowledged Ms. Peggy's right to appeal. A key issue of contention in the ruling is that the tribunal formed a balanced view of the protected characteristics under the 2010 Equality Act. It argued that it was not inherently unlawful for a transgender female to use a changing room that aligned with her chosen gender. The 300-page ruling also said that Dr. Beth Upton, a transgender medic, did not pose any greater risk to Ms. Peggy by being in the women's changing room at Victoria Hospital in Kirkcaldy than if it had been another woman assigned female at birth. It comes after the judiciary issued an amendment to the ruling, with Employment Judge Sandy Kemp correcting clerical mistakes, errors, or omissions in the ruling. However, it did not change the verdict in the judgment. Instead, changed a quote from the 2021 ruling between Maya Forstater and Centre for Global Development Europe. In a certificate of correction issued by the Judicial Office, Employment Judge Sandy Kemp corrects the clerical mistakes, errors or omissions in the judgment. It deleted a paragraph which Ms. Forstater said had been made up and corrected it to read, "This judgment does not mean that those with gender critical beliefs can misgender trans persons with impunity. The claimant, like everyone else, will continue to be subject to the prohibitions on discrimination and harassment under the EQA. Whether or not conduct in a given situation does amount to harassment or discrimination within the meaning of EQA will be for a tribunal to determine in a given case." It added, "We consider that quotation provides support for the proposition that the Equality Act 2010 does not create a hierarchy of protected characteristics." First Minister John Swinney told journalists in Holyrood that the Scottish Government was considering the outcome of the Employment Tribunal. He had previously given his full confidence to the board of NHS, despite intense pressure to sack the leadership. That article was written by Rebecca McCurdy and recorded by Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday, the 11th of December 2025, from the news section. Newspaper editor charged over indecent communications. Article written by Josh Pussett-Sopamako and read by Ian. A Scottish newspaper editor has been arrested and charged in connection with indecent online communications. David McCann, editor of The Times and the Sunday Times Scotland, was suspended from the publication after police officers executed a search warrant at an Edinburgh area property 2 weeks ago. A spokesperson for News UK, who owns The Times, said that McCann had been suspended due to a criminal investigation unrelated to his work. It is understood that McCann made no plea after appearing at Edinburgh Sheriff Court on the 26th of November. McCann, 43, was remanded in custody overnight and released on bail after appearing in court the following day. A Police Scotland spokesperson said, "On Tuesday, 25th November 2025, officers executed a search warrant at a property in the Edinburgh area. A 43-year-old man has been arrested and charged in connection with indecent online communications. Belfast native McCann became editor of the Times in Scotland in July 2025, succeeding Magnus Llewellyn. A spokesperson for the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service said, "A standard prosecution report has been received by the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service from Police Scotland in relation to a 43-year-old man." A spokesperson for News UK said, "We have been informed that David McCann, editor of the Times and the Sunday Times in Scotland, has been made the subject of a criminal investigation unrelated to his work. He has been suspended from the business. We will not be making any further comment at this time." Report by Josh Pizzuto-Pomacco, read by Ian. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 11th of December 2025, from his sports section. Brazil legend predicts his country will struggle versus Scotland. Report written by Mark Walker. Brazilian legend Rivaldo reckons his nation could struggle at first against Scotland when they play them in the World Cup in Miami, but he reckons Brazil will then blow Scotland away. Steve Clarke's side must play Brazil in the final game of the group stages in what will be their first final since 1998. They will face Haiti and Morocco before then in Boston. World Cup winner Rivaldo played against Scotland in the opening game of that tournament in France, where Brazil edged a 2-1 win in Paris. And he expects a similar tough battle for Carlo Ancelotti's men in June. He said, "Scotland are an opponent I know very well. I played against them in the 1998 World Cup. At the start of the match, it might be a struggle, but Scotland doesn't have the same tradition as Brazil. Of course, we need to respect all national teams, but Brazil is Brazil. We need to impose ourselves and win. Scotland will go into the World Cup with confidence, trying to make history, trying to beat Brazil, and it could happen. But as a Brazilian, I believe we're always strong in the group stage, and we'll get through easily, although we always respect the opponents, of course." That article was written by Mark Walker and recorded by Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 11th of December 2025, from its sports section. Nancy responds to criticism over tactics board and footwear choice. Article written by chief football writer Matthew Lindsay. Wilfried Nancy insisted that he will be able to block out the criticism he receives as Celtic manager and focus solely on putting a winning team on the pitch as he prepared to make his European debut against Roma. Nancy has been savage for his formation, for using a tactics board in the dugout, and even for his choice of footwear since his side's disappointing 2-1 defeat to William Hill Premiership leaders Hearts at Parkhead on Sunday. The Frenchman, who was named MLS Coach of the Year during the 3 seasons that he spent in charge of Columbus Crew in the United States, yesterday confessed that he will not be completely immune from the abuse which will be aimed in his direction in his high-profile role. But as he looked forward to seeing the Scottish champions take on their Italian opponents in a league phase match in the East End this evening, he stressed that he will have no difficulty concentrating fully on football in Scotland. "I respect people," he said. "Criticism is part of my job, but they don't know what I want to do on the pitch, except winning. So I cannot compete with that. Am I going to write to all the people and ask them why they are talking about me like that? No. I'm not saying I am happy with criticism and someone who comes to tell me that. But there are 2 ways to handle it. You either ignore it or you take it. I do my job and I do the best that I can. After that we will see. But it is part of the job. Maybe people are going to say something different. Understand me well. I don't think I am invincible. It is not the point. But in the job that I do, everyone can talk about. Simple as that. So why am I going to waste my time worrying about that? If I read a comment where somebody attacks me personally, I'm going to lie if I tell you that doesn't touch me. I'm a human being, simple as that. But I have decided to shut down everything. If people want to tell me that in my face, it is okay. This is the way." Nancy continued, "I will be honest, when I had the opportunity to become a coach, I told myself to cut everything. This is what I did. I cut everything on Twitter regarding my name, the club, what people can say. They have the right to say something. This is part of the job. I'm not here to comment on everything. I know what this club means for the fans. I know the history of the club. I know the passion from the support here, and I respect that. But, again, the most important thing is to control what I can control here. People have the right to talk. I'm going to dress one way. Maybe they'll say they don't like the way I dress. I don't waste time in that. If I use it, the tactics board, it's because it's good for me. I'm not saying I'll use it all the time. Nancy irked many Celtic fans when he stated that he does not care about winning or losing after the Hearts match and was only interested in how his players performed, but he expanded on his controversial comment ahead of the Roma match. My job is 24/7, he said. It does not change here or in the MLS or in France. It does not change. You have to understand me, it is part of football. If you cannot accept that, you can't do the job. Nobody can put more pressure on me than myself. I want to be good, but especially I want to be good for my players. People can say whatever they want to say. I still put a lot of pressure on myself to find solutions, to help my players get better. Listen, I want to win. When I don't win, I'm awake in my bed looking at the ceiling. I have a pain in my belly. I don't want to eat. That is the job. But when we win, we're going to have to work again. When we lose, we have to work again in the same way. But when we win, it can buy time and the coach can stay a little bit longer. It is good and we have more money to spend and so on. Nonce, who was only named as Brendan Rodgers' permanent replacement last Wednesday night, admitted that his mother had been concerned about his physical well-being when she spoke to him after he arrived in Scotland. My mum told me I had bags under my eyes, he said. I told her I just came in, had jet lag and was trying to anticipate everything. Again, this is part of her job. I'm excited by it, and I try to stay at peace with myself and open my eyes to understand the culture. My mum must have read a lot of things because she thinks I can't take care of myself. Listen, my family know this is part of the job. That article was written by Matthew Lindsay, read and recorded by E. McKenna.
From the Herald Scotland, Tuesday the 9th of December 2025. News breaking. Data shows SNP fails to deliver on teacher numbers promises. Article written by James McInerney. The Scottish Government has failed to hit any of its promises regarding teacher numbers in Scotland, according to the latest official figures. The annual census of teachers across Scottish schools shows that the latest total stands at 53,475. Although this is a small increase in the figures from 2024, it falls significantly short of the number of specific pledges offered by the Scottish Government and leaves a key policy commitment in tatters. The Government had various promises to restore teacher numbers to the 2023 levels, to cut contact time of teachers by 90 minutes per week, which requires additional staff, and to increase overall teacher numbers by 3,500 over the course of the current Parliament. Today's release confirms that none of these pledges have been met. With respect to teacher numbers, a Scottish Government spokesperson said, "The rise in teacher numbers reflects our investment in the workforce, which means the Scottish continues to have the lowest pupils per ratio and best paid teachers in the UK. We recognise that there is more work needed to return to these numbers in their 2023 levels, and we will continue to work with the councils towards this." More to follow. Article written by James McInerney, read by Helen Classy. From the Herald Scotland, Tuesday the 9th of December 2025. News exclusive. Fish and chip shop in historic Scottish village up for sale. Article written by Brian Donnelly. A popular fish and chip shop has been brought to the market. The premises has a monopoly trading position in a historic Scottish village. Cornerstone Business Agents is handling the leasehold sale of Roswell Friar in Midlothian village of Roswell. The agent said, "Our clients have owned and operated the Roswell Friar for 3.5 years, during which time they have built up an excellent reputation locally. They have reluctantly placed the business on the market for personal reasons and will leave behind a well-equipped and profitable business. The shop has been a finalist in several categories over the years in the Scottish Fish and Chip Awards, with rave reviews from judges to go with excellent online reviews. There is a serious potential to expand on the limited hours and the 5-day trading that the current owners offer. The business is run by the 2 owners along with 2 part-time staff and 2 drivers." The agent also said the sale of Roswell Friar is a wonderful opportunity for a hands-on operator looking to take on a profitable business with a great reputation. The business is situated in Carnethy Street in the centre of Midlothian village of Roswell. A former mining village, Roswell is located about 10 miles south of Edinburgh city centre and is close to the surrounding Midlothian towns of Pennycook, Loanhead, Dalkeith, Bonnyrigg and Gore Bridge. There has been continued residential development in Roswell over the last 20 years, where the number of homes has more than doubled in the area. This expansion is still going on. The Roswell Friar offers a wide and varied menu with all the usual fried food favourites, whilst also offering pizzas, kebabs, burgers, wraps and pastas. They have their own app as well as offering deliveries through the usual platforms. The leasehold is offered at a guide price of £69,500 and an annual rent of £12,342. Article written by Brian Donnelly, read by Helen Classy. From the Herald Scotland, Tuesday the 9th of December 2025. News exclusive. Lord Advocate warns of disruption after Rape Shield ruling. Article written by Kathleen Nutt. The Lord Advocate is warning of disruption in the justice system as she gave a detailed assessment of the impact a landmark ruling by the Supreme Court will have on victims, defendants and lawyers in sex offence trials as the judgment is implemented in Scotland. Dorothy Bain, KC, set out her views in a letter to the convener of the Holyrood's Criminal Justice Committee, the SNP MSP, Audrey Nicholl, after the UK's highest court found the way legislation relating to what evidence can be presented in proceedings was being interpreted was putting the accused right in the fair trial at risk. The unanimous ruling handed down by Lord Reid, President of the Supreme Court, last month, found that laws designed to protect victims in court were being applied in a way that was too restrictive. It said the approach, which has been taken since 2013, risked breaching Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights. The accused rights to a fair trial by not allowing the defendant to present evidence that could properly challenge the prosecutor's case. Known as Rape Shield Law, Section 274 and 275 of the Criminal Procedure Scotland Act 1995 are designed to protect complainers in the sexual offence trials by regulating and often excluding evidence of their sexual history or character. Section 274 establishes the general rule that such evidence is inadmissible, while the Section 275 allows for exceptions in specific circumstances. But for a Section 275 application to succeed, defence lawyers must demonstrate when they make the application that not just the evidence is relevant, but that its relevance outweighs the intrusion it represents into the privacy and dignity of the complainer. Miss Bain told Miss Nicholl that Scottish courts are now under a duty to take more flexible and nuanced approach to applications under the Section 275, including those relating to sexual history evidence, bad character evidence and any other evidence bearing in the complainer's credibility and reliability. She stated that fairness may sometimes require the admission of intrusive evidence, as she went on to highlight the consequences of the ruling. On the impact on existing and future cases, she said there would be disruption with current and future cases in the system facing delays as prosecution lawyers receive new training and defence lawyers submit applications for evidence that should be heard that may previously have been disallowed. Article written by Kathleen Nutt, read by Helen Classy. From the Herald Scotland, Tuesday the 9th of December 2025, News. Plan for 1,000 new homes at former City Factory site backed. Article written by Brian Donnelly. Plans for almost 1,000 new homes and a hotel in a Scottish city has been recommended for approval. The proposals for a huge former factory site near the country's busiest airport were described as representing a significant investment. The Herald earlier revealed that Summit's Capital has submitted a planning application for a residential-led mixed-use development at Edinburgh Gateway, the former site of Sesha Packaging Facility. The development said it provides a unique opportunity to regenerate the former industrial location on Turnhouse Road. The application has now been recommended for approval and will be considered by the councillors next week. The forum said the flagship vibrant new neighbourhood aims to deliver a mix of uses. This includes the delivery of more than 950 homes, including 35% affordable homes, plus a new hotel with over 170 bedrooms. The housing proposed will include tenure-blind affordable housing, addressing the city's well-published housing emergency, and including the provision of accessible family homes and build-to-rent accommodation. BTR sees homes built specifically for rent rather than sale. Papers to go before councillors stated it is recommended that the application be granted. The proposal delivers 957 new homes on an allocated housing site as part of a mixed-use development with a hotel and commercial uses and is highly acceptable in principle. This proposal will form part of a emerging area in West Edinburgh as envisaged in the development plan. The paper continues. The former factory facility is required to be demolished to allow development of the proposal, however, use of brownfield site is supported by the plan. Affordable housing of 35% is proposed on site as required by policy, and a good mix of housing in a mixture of flat sizes from studios to 3 bedrooms, including 20% for families, is provided. The site next to Edinburgh Airport became available after the Spain-based paper and cardboard company Sesha relocated to a purpose-built facility in Livingston. Article written by Brian Donnelly, read by Helen Classy. From the Herald Scotland. Tuesday the 9th of December 2025. News. Police and Coast Guard search for missing Dundee man Alan Woodcock. Article written by Jodie Harrison. A multi-agency search has been launched to find a pensioner who has gone missing from Dundee. Police and HM Coast Guard Search and Rescue in Tayside say they are concerned for Alan Woodcock, 76, who went missing on Monday. Alan was last seen around mid-morning in the Osborne Place area of the city. Officers believe he may have travelled towards Arbroath, possibly via Ballybudden, Barry and Carnoustie. He is described as being 5'9" tall, slim build and with grey thinning hair and wearing glasses. He is likely to be dressed in a grey woolen hat, a green barber-style jacket, blue jeans and grey trainers. Inspector Ahmad from Lochee Police Station said, "We, along with Alan's family, are concerned for his well-being and are seeking the public's assistance to check their gardens, garages and sheds as Alan may have taken shelter within. I would also ask anyone who may have seen Alan in Dundee, Carnoustie or Arbroath since mid-morning on Monday to contact the police as a matter of urgency. Please quote the incident number 3104 of Monday the 8th of December 2025. I would also appeal directly to Alan. If you are reading this message, please contact your family, approach any police officer or phone the officers so we can assure that you are safe and well." Article written by Jodie Harrison, read by Helen Classy.
From Herald Scotland, 14th of December 2025, from the Arts and Ents section. Former Herald political editor, only Scot among 25 new peers in House of Lords. Article by Gabriel Mackay. A former Herald political editor is the only Scot among 25 new Labour peers who will sit in the House of Lords. Catherine MacLeod, who was born in Glencoe, was the political editor of the newspaper from 2003 to 2007, before leaving to work as a special advisor to Alistair Darling when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer. This week, Sir Keir Starmer selected Ms MacLeod as the only Scot on the list of 25 new peers who will join the Upper House. She told the Sunday Times, "I'm just pleased that someone from the Highlands can be there. The Highlands have always been represented by toffs. I never expected this. I never looked for it and never sought it. I don't know who put me forward, and I'm certainly not there because I'm a financial donor." Torquil Crichton, the MP for Naha-Eileanan and ER, and himself a former journalist with the Herald, Daily Record and BBC, said, "We need renewal in the Lords to get legislation through and to abolish it." Mr Starmer has previously pledged to abolish the House of Lords and replace it with an elected chamber, but in its manifesto for the 2024 election, Labour instead said it would reform the Upper House by getting rid of hereditary peerages, introducing a mandatory retirement age, and improving the national and regional balance of the second chamber. A bill to remove 91 hereditary peers is currently going through Parliament. Since being elected, the Prime Minister has appointed 62 new peers who are unelected, with Labour saying it is addressing a serious imbalance in the Lords after years of Conservative governments. As of Wednesday, the Conservatives have 282 peers, compared with Labour's 209, and the Liberal Democrats 75. There are 177 crossbenchers and 40 non-affiliated peers. David Cameron appointed 245 peers during his time in office, Boris Johnson 87, Theresa May 43, Rishi Sunak 51, and Liz Truss 29, despite being Prime Minister for just 49 days. Tony Blair holds the record for peerages, sending 374 to the House of Lords, including 101 in his first 18 months. And that article was written by Gabriel Mackay. From Herald Scotland, 14th of December 2025, from the Arts and Ents section. Review: Phil Cunningham's Christmas Songbook, Albert Hall's Stirling, 4 out of 5 stars. Review by Teddy Jameson. There is something missing from this year's Phil Cunningham Christmas Songbook. It's Phil Cunningham himself. The day before the first date in this annual festive tour, it was announced that Cunningham would not be leading the celebrations because of illness. That possibly explains the slightly ramshackle air that hangs around proceedings this evening in Stirling. The musician had been replaced by Irish accordionist Alan Kelly, who, we are told, has learnt the set list in just 2 days. Rather well, it would appear. He is on point throughout the night. It's singers Eddie Reader and Karen Matheson who seem a little unsure of what's happening next at times. "We hope the show's not too slick for you," fiddler John McCusker jokes as Matheson struggles to find a lyric sheet at one point. "Who's in charge?" someone in the audience shouts affectionately a song or two later. "No one's in charge," Reader admits. "We're all Phil's wains." None of which really matters, of course. It just gives proceedings the air of spontaneity, quite a feat given that these annual extravaganzas have been going on in one form or another for 20 years now. A gather-up of Christmas tunes and Scottish musicians, this year's songbook may be missing Cunningham, but it's hardly short of talent. as well as McCusker, Matheson, Reader and Kelly. The lineup also features Low's Chris Draver, guitarist Ian Carr, double bassist Kevin Maguire, and the 5-piece Songbook Brass Ensemble, who are used sparingly but add a real warmth to the sound when they join the ensemble. Cunningham's absence colours things to begin with. It perhaps doesn't help that the first half of the show has, at times, a slightly churchy, stiff-collared feel to it, with a set list that is tipped towards hymns, Hark the Herald Angels Sing, and a Gaelic version of Silent Night, sung impeccably by Matheson, and Christmas standards, Little Drummer Boy, and The Holly and the Ivy. But Chris Draver begins to loosen things up, singing his own song Shining Star, which is given a rolling honky-tonk looseness here, followed by a medley of McCusker's own tunes which see Drever shake his hips in time in a manner Shakira would be proud of. A rolling, joyous take on Mindy Smith's Santa Will Find You then seems to light the fuse on the evening, and when the ensemble returns for the second half of the evening, it's clear we're not in church anymore. Reader introduces the first take on a pop song of the evening by this wee Scottish boy called John Lennon. He used to be in a band called the Beatles or something. He came from somewhere up north, and his wife Yoko Ono. She contributed a wonderful line in this. War is over if you want it. Matheson then takes the lead for a version of Sandy Denny's Who Knows Where the Time Goes, which would be a brave decision in any other circumstance, but Matheson's vocal is gorgeous and the arrangement has a real bounce and swing that undermines any invidious comparisons. By the time Reader breaks into Elvis's Blue Christmas, which then segues into her Fairground Attraction number 1, Perfect, it's clear that the sofa has been symbolically pushed back and we're at the serious partying section of the evening. It's difficult to say what is the most enjoyable part of the night. Is it Matheson and Reader's harmonising, or the musical back and forth between Kelly's accordion and McCusker's fiddle? Maybe it's just all of it. By the end of the night, the spirit of Jimmy Shand has been evoked, and takes on Scarlet Ribbons and Silver Bells have reminded us that Christmas for most of us is an eternal yesterday, a nostalgic, at times mournful, weighted moment every year that draws into the past. Tonight we go singing into the darkness. And that article was written by Teddy Jameson. From Herald Scotland, 14th of December 2025, from the Arts and Ints section. Review: Scottish Ballet, Wee Nutcracker, Tramway, Glasgow. 4 out of 5 stars. Article by Mary Brennan. It might say wee in the title, but there's no shortage of ambition or creative imagination in this delightful one-act version of the Nutcracker for younger audiences. Curtain up and we're watching a ballet class run by the tyrannical Mr. Pringle. Clara, our lively heroine, tries hard to do as he demands, but she keeps bumping into other dancers and constantly falling over. The slightly slapstick element here has youngsters in the audience gleefully giggling, but they're readily on side with Clara, especially when Pringle expels her. That night, Clara's troubled dreams revisit the day's events, weaving them into a fast-moving adventure that tinies can easily follow and relate to, because, after all, what child hasn't dreamt that a special toy can come alive, just like Clara's Nutcracker does? Hurrah! There are nonetheless scary bits, and again, this is where in-house choreographer Nicholas Shoesmith and writer Robert Allen Evans bring childhood sensibilities into their compact take on Nutcracker's Act 2 realm of fantastical encounters. Who other than Mr. Pringle could be King Rat, threatening the things Clara cherishes most? And who other than Clara's mother has the love and determination to help Clara overcome her fears and disappointments? On hand, in a family-friendly touch, is Clara's supportive granny, bringing gifts that help Clara's dreams come true en route, in just 45 minutes, to a heartwarming, happy ending. The gifts from Scottish Ballet to wee nutcracker audiences are top-notch performances from a cast of 10 dancers, some minimal but effective set design, and a lovely mix of live piano and orchestral recordings that honour Tchaikovsky's glorious music. The aim is, of course, to make ballet accessible and hopefully attractive to young children. Age 5+ is recommended, but several toddlers were at the show I saw and, like the whole house, they were clearly spellbound throughout. So well done, Scottish Ballet, for recognising the magic of live performances and for staging such an adorable festive treat for all ages. And that review was written by Mary Brennan. From Herald Scotland, 14th of December 2025, from the Arts and Ints section. Review: The Scottish Chamber Orchestra dazzles at the City Halls, Glasgow. 4 out of 5 stars. Review written by Keith Bruce. The SCO's New Dimensions strand within its 25-26 season mostly features music that is much newer than the 3 works featured in this portrait concert of American composer John Adams. The newest work in the programme, the virtuosic clarinet concerto Gnarly Buttons, was composed 30 years ago and is one of Adams' most personal and distinctive works, remembering his father, alongside whom the young John played clarinet in New England marching bands. SCO principal guest conductor Andrew Mance revealed that the technical difficulty of the piece led Maximiliano Martin, the SCO's long-serving first clarinet and the work's soloist, to joke that he didn't believe the composer played the instrument at all. Lightning speed fingering and the exploration of the full range of the clarinet make it a very demanding showpiece, but it is also great fun, especially the hoedown, Mad Cow, central movement, with its mooing keyboard sample and folky banjo, mandolin and guitar plucking from the multitasking Roberto Carrillo Garcia. With jazz influence in the mix as well, Gnarly Buttons was a world away from the work that had opened the concert, 1978's Shaker Loops, the composer's first great success, and the reason why he is still sometimes, mistakenly, labelled a minimalist. Even that piece hardly fits the category in its second movement, hymning slews, and the robust development of the material in the finale, but it does begin in that style, and there was something a little too tentative, as opposed to merely quiet, about the SCO's upper strings at the start. The work after the interval, written midway between those two and of the time of Adams' great opera Nixon in China, was the most successful of the evening. Fearful Symmetries requires a large and very specific ensemble, with a 4-piece sax section led by Lewis Banks on soprano, and 3 keyboards under the fingers of Simon Smith, John Cameron, and Stephen Doughty. While Mance was essentially steering the players through the intricate time signatures of the first half's music, the conductor really seemed to have something to say with this piece and shaped its narrative beautifully. The relative rhythmic straightforwardness and clear allusions to both big band music and dance floor pop also make it a work that is altogether easier to love. And that review was written by Keith Bruce and read to you today by me, Bob Lizer.
From the Herald, Monday, 15th of December 2025, Sports section. Brendan Rodgers set for new club as appointment close. By Blair Meikle, digital sports journalist. Brendan Rodgers is close to becoming the new manager at Saudi side Al Quadsar, according to a report. After quitting the Celtic job last month, there were strong suggestions the Middle East could be his next destination, with several clubs said to be ready to offer him a lucrative pay package. Now Al Quadsar have a vacancy and are ready to hand the job to the 52-year-old, as per The Athletic. After Michael Gondoles was sacked, the club promised to act quickly and have considered a number of candidates, with a track record in Europe. But they appear to have landed on Rodgers. Former Rangers CEO James Bisgrove is now working at the Saudi club and has been at the forefront of the process of identifying a new boss. He claimed the Northern Irishman's 2 spells at Parkhead and down in England, experience of winning trophies and playing style have all appealed. Al Quad share are owned by Aramco, the majority state-owned national oil company of Saudi Arabia. That article was by Blair Meikle.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 15th of December 2025, from the Voices section. Centre Park's Scottish Borders Howick plan is so important. Article written by Ian McConnell, Group Business Editor. A fair smattering of positives in the last week are highlighted by business editor Ian McConnell. These include Centre Park's big plans for the Scottish borders, which will deliver massive economic and societal benefits to an area which has not had its troubles to seek since the tail end of the last century, having suffered terrible job losses in the textiles industry. There has also been good news on the Scottish economy and overseas travel. There has been a fair smattering of positives to provide some pre-festive cheer amid the broader UK economic gloom. Centre Park's huge investment in the borders has been in focus in the last week. The group's £400 million plans for a holiday village near Howick were approved unanimously last Monday by Scottish Borders Council's Planning and Building Standards Committee. This is another important milestone for a project which will deliver massive economic and societal benefits to an area which has not had its troubles to seek since the tail end of the last century, having suffered terrible job losses in the textiles industry. It would be difficult to overstate the importance of Centre Park's investment to the Scottish borders. Crucially, it will enable many young people who want to stay in the area in which they grew up to do so by providing vital year-round employment and attract people to come and live in the borders. It was back in November last year that Centre Parks revealed its plans to open its first holiday village in Scotland. At that stage, I interviewed the Holiday Village Group's chief executive, Colin McKinley. As I observed in my column in the Herald on Wednesday, one thing which has been striking in conversations with people living and working in the borders since I interviewed Mr. McKinley about Centre Park's plans is a widespread enthusiasm about the year-round jobs that such a huge holiday village will bring. Russell Griggs, who chairs economic development agency South of Scotland Enterprise, said following last Monday's planning approval, "This is a hugely significant milestone, not just for Centre Parks, but for the Scottish borders and the south of Scotland. The benefits are expected to be widespread, with the most recent Centre Parks village to open in Ireland making a positive impact on rural repopulation and retaining young people in the area. It is demoralising to see depopulation in rural and remote communities wherever they are, but this is certainly not an easy issue to tackle." My column observed, "There is no doubting the challenges that the borders economy has faced since the tail end of the last century, notably the huge job losses suffered by Howick and other communities in the textiles sector. And Mr. Griggs' observations about the part played by Centre Parks Village at Longford Forest near Ballymarn in Ireland, which opened in 2019, in rural repopulation and retaining young people, are interesting. This reality in Ireland surely offers much hope when it comes to assessing the part which Centre Park's first Scottish holiday village could play in helping the borders tackle its undoubted economic challenges." Elsewhere in the last week, there has been some good news on the Scottish economy. A key report showed Scottish business investment has climbed to a 20-year high as a percentage of the nation's economic output. Business investment as a share of Scottish gross domestic product increased by 0.8 percentage points in 2023 to 10.2%, according to the report published by the Confederation of British Industry in Scotland and law firm Addleshaw Goddard and compiled by the University of Strathclyde's Fraser of Allender Institute. The Scottish Productivity Index 2025 report observed, "For the first year since 2005, Scotland now exceeds its long-term trend, 1998 to 2023, of 9.8%. Conversely, the UK overall is 0.6 percentage points below its long-term trend of 10.1%. It noted the UK experienced a 0.3 percentage point decline in business investment as a share of GDP from 9.8% in 2022 to 9.5% in 2023. Meanwhile, the degree to which Scotland leads the way for higher level qualifications among the UK nations was underlined in the report. Nearly 54% of the working age population in Scotland is educated to this level, compared with 47% in England, 42% in Northern Ireland, and 44% in Wales, the report observed. A CBI Scotland spokesman noted, "Higher level means higher education certificate or above, and refers to RQF, Regulated Qualifications Framework, NVQ, National Vocational Qualification 4 equivalent, and above. For example, HND, degree and higher degree level qualifications or equivalent." Scottish Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes said, "I am encouraged to see business investment reaching its highest level in 20 years, showing that industry recognises Scotland's real strengths, one of the UK's most highly educated workforces, globally significant energy assets, and improving digital and green infrastructure." Fraser of Allender director Mary Spowage declared, "Long-standing structural challenges remain evident in the Scottish economy. However," she also observed, "the past year has seen modest yet broad-based improvement across several dimensions of economic performance, from business investment and digital infrastructure to educational attainment and innovation activity." Elsewhere in the last week, there has been further encouraging news on the strength of the overseas travel sector. Package holiday giant and airline TUI on Wednesday flagged the strength of demand from UK customers as it announced record profits. TUI declared its underlying earnings before interest and tax, EBIT, of €1,459 million in the year to September 30th were its best ever. It noted this figure was up 12.6% on the prior financial year on a constant currency basis, exceeding the raised guidance that it provided in August of an increase between 9% and 11%. TUI noted customer numbers in its markets and airline business, which includes package holiday operations, were broadly stable at 20.2 million in the year to September 30th, reflecting higher volumes in the UK and central region against lower numbers, in particular in our western region market. The record underlying EBIT number from TUI is the latest in a stream of good news from the overseas travel sector, following updates from Ryanair, EasyJet and Jet2, which have also provided some sunshine amid that gloom. That article was written by Ian McConnell and read to you by Elizabeth. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 15th of December 2025, from the Voices section. 2 chats that make me optimistic for engineering's future. Article written by Paul Sheerin, Chief Executive of Scottish Engineering. In search of an antidote to the recent and rather baffling UK budget that missed the mark on jump-starting the flatlining economy, as luck would have it, along came not one, but 2 conversations with members of one of Scotland's engineering success stories. A chat with Zach Thompson, design engineer at MTEL in Howick, and our own 2025 Young Engineer of the Year winner, was always bound to lift the gloom. Nothing raises your optimism more than witnessing the young engineers who reach the finalist list through their sheer talent, resilience and innovation, reinforcing the feeling that if this is our industry's future, then we have every reason to be optimistic. Hearing their personal and project journeys is a privilege, but separating a winner from the group is a real challenge. Zach achieved that separation by doing what his company says comes naturally to him, listening to MTEL's customers and then driving the organisation to find a solution where none exists or the current one isn't the full answer. In a world where we all expect flawless internet without restriction, finding ways to install their end-to-end fibre optic solutions efficiently to the building that requires it is key. In industry speak, this means designing a low-cost, reliable method of installing longer-distance final-mile fibre to the premises, and this simple summary of need defined the challenge clearly for him. To avoid expensive and bulky equipment, Zach's solution combined changes to the texture of the cable, allowing it to be pushed rather than blown by compressed air to its final destination by a simple driver unit designed to be powered by any handheld battery drill. Designs for the Revolink 3 cable and drop drive pushing machine are now patent pending and have achieved an industry-first pushing distance of 300 metres. I asked Zach what the recognition of success for his project meant for him, and beyond his consistent and continuing modesty, he admitted that he had been surprised and delighted at the reaction and praise from family and friends, along with the recognition and celebration through social media and the local Borders-based press. It means a lot to me because my path into engineering wasn't the clear and straight path that I saw some others follow. I knew that I enjoyed practical hands-on working, but my first try wasn't the match for me. An engineering apprenticeship with sister company Minetti led to a transfer to MTEL, and I haven't looked back since. These examples of game-changing engineering success that bring economic and societal benefits are gold dust for our goal of celebrating the excellence that exists in Scottish engineering and manufacturing, and rarely get the attention they deserve. This story, like all those finalists that came beside and before, celebrates the individual excellence, as well as reflecting the reality that this always comes hand in hand with organisational excellence too. Warming to that theme, I also talked to MTEL's Chief Executive Tony Rogers, currently based in the United Arab Emirates, as MTEL's global expansion now includes their newest 25,000 square metre innovation and manufacturing facility based there. It brings their total manufacturing footprint to 7 facilities across the UK, Denmark, Germany, USA and UAE, an impressive continuation of their commitment to invest in their people, plants and equipment. I opened the conversation by offering my congratulations for their newest expansion. I also commented that I had been impressed during a previous visit to their headquarters in Howick to hear of the involvement of the team based there, including another young engineer finalist, Ryan Bryers, in their projects to expand to the US and UAE. Did Tony recognise the benefit to the accelerated experience of the team based here as a result? The expansion in global operations has driven our continued business growth, allowing us to be competitive in key markets through location, cost, competitiveness, and speed of project delivery, thanks to the pace at which projects can be delivered outside the constraints of the UK, he said. But the beating heart of MTEL is still firmly in our operations based in Scotland, in the concentration of our R&D, engineering and manufacturing resources. And yes, that brings opportunity for the team to lead those projects, but they do so because they are our experts, whether that's Zach working to meet our customers' aspirations or Ryan looking after our manufacturing estate across those locations. Tony also shared that the outlook for MTEL going forward is one where they are ready to reap the rewards of their investment and capacity. Grid infrastructure renewal and upgrade represents a really strong opportunity for our solutions, and the scale of investment that has been outlined for the UK makes that clear. But the UK is not alone in that need to upgrade and renew, and other markets where we have strengths, such as the USA, also have their own programme of investment that we are well placed to compete for. Awards for MTEL are not just for their young engineers. This year, they were shortlisted as finalists in 2 categories of the Made in Britain Impact Awards, one of which was Inspiring Leader of the Year for Solutions Director Colin Kirkpatrick, who just happens to be Zach's line manager. And unsurprisingly, at the top of the organisation, Tony Rogers himself was a recent winner of EY's International Entrepreneurial Leader of the Year for Scotland. It is an impressive journey for a company founded in Jedburgh in 1980 that continues onwards and upwards thanks to an outstanding team and clear, talented leadership. Paul Sheeran is Chief Executive of Scottish Engineering. The article was read to you by Elizabeth. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 15th of December 2025, from the Voices section. It can get scary. Would you live in a place like this? Article written by Mark Smith. It started with a utopian vision of better places to live. But one Scottish housing estate illustrates the challenges ahead, says Mark Smith. I'm in one of the most remarkable housing estates in Scotland, wandering about, speaking to the folk who live here, and a lady walking her dog stops to chat. I tell her I'm here with an expert on architecture and design to look at the estate and talk about its legacy and the positives and the negatives, and she's keen to give her views. The flats are terrific, she says, but it can get scary. It's a word that comes up a few times, scary. Quite a few of the people who live here are single or retired, and some of them tell me there's a problem with security and a lack of maintenance staff and groups of men hanging about. I ask another resident who's out and about if this is a good place to live, and she responds with a perfect example of Glasgow laconicism. Aye and no. She quite likes her flat, she says. She's been here 29 years, but doesn't feel she can go out at night. And if you live in a place where you don't feel like you can move about freely, we have a problem. The question is who or what's at fault, because there are some people who would blame the buildings themselves. The Dundas Vale estate is in the centre of Glasgow and is made up of 6 5-storey blocks and 2 high-rises, all arranged above a ground-level car park and around traffic-free green spaces. It's a classic example of the kind of 1960s brutalism that may have started with the best utopian intentions, but went on to become the focus of concerns about social planning, cohesion and disorder. When Sir Basil Spencer's flats in the Gorbals were pulled down, for example, some people said, "Good riddance." But it's significant that none of the residents I spoke to in Dundas Vale have much of an issue with the flats themselves. As I say, one woman thinks the flats are terrific. And the architectural expert I'm visiting with today, Professor Bruce Peter of Glasgow School of Art, points out how clever and pleasing the design of the place actually is. The idea was you'd create places where people would hang out and chat, he says, so the concept is very good, especially the idea of having parking at ground level and a raised area for recreation. It's a clever piece of planning. There will be some who disagree with the professor. Brutalist architecture is a love-it-hate-it sort of thing. But whatever you think of the design, what quickly becomes clear when you talk to the people who live in Dundas Vale is that a lot of the issues they face have nothing much to do with the design. It was by Walter Underwood, by the way, who also did the Queen Margaret Union at Glasgow Uni, and a lot to do with external factors that are affecting lots of other places too. One of the issues is maintenance. There are lots of places in Glasgow that are in much worse condition than Dundas Vale. The raised garden area looks pretty well looked after and is a pleasant place to be on a sunny day. But the residents I talk to say the housing association doesn't come out as much as it should, and the concierge service has been cut, and the public areas are getting tatty and run down. As Professor Peter points out, when people complain about brutalist architecture, they're often complaining about the condition of the building rather than its underlying design. The sense that a place isn't being looked after causes other problems too. The ground-level car park at Dundas Vale is a great idea and quite a visionary way of incorporating both cars and people into a community. The cars are hidden away underneath, while up above with the houses are big green areas, and at Dundas Vale it works well. On the raised level there are large lawns and a community garden. But on the lower level, the car park is not as well maintained as it used to be. The security gates that used to control entry have been removed, and the residents tell me it's become a bit of a focus for drug dealing and a magnet for groups of young men up to no good, and it's certainly not a place where many women feel safe. This is the sort of thing that leads people to see modernism in a dystopian rather than a utopian light, and you can see what they're getting at. A lot of these buildings started with a sense of idealism, but we've ended up with places that can foster a sense of unease and danger. The other issue that's making things worse is one that's bedevilled countless housing estates in Scotland over the years. Think of Spencer's blocks in the Gorbals or the big estates in Castlemilk or on the edge of other cities, and the same story recurs. The problems start when the mix of a community changes. You'll have heard it before. The new estates and high-rises of the 50s and 60s were great places to live, but problematic families were moved in en masse and nice families moved out, and it started to change. We know that mixed, balanced communities work the best, and if the mix and the balance tips too far one way, you're in trouble. It's clear from my conversations with the folk who live there that Dundasvale is suffering some of these issues. But there's another issue as well that's never easy to talk about. Every one of the female residents I spoke to said they'd encountered groups of young single men in the corridors and public spaces, and it made them feel uncomfortable or unsafe. The other concern they expressed was that when the flats became available, they are mostly being allocated to migrants, and that the migrants are overwhelmingly young single men. As I've said before about other parts of Glasgow, it's an issue that's creating tension and anger in the communities affected. And we all know how that tension and anger is likely to express itself at the elections in May. It strikes me that a lot of the problems at Dundasvale come from the way we continue to treat modernist social housing of the 50s and 60s. As Professor Peter and I wander about, a question keeps occurring. Would you live in a place like this? And the professor says if he were younger, his answer would be yes, absolutely. And I see what he means. Dundasvale has always been one of my favourite places of modernist design, and there's a lot to love in the great straight lines of maisonette flats round the plaza. When I worked up the road, this was where I'd often come to get away from the office for a bit of peace and quiet. But the question's still hanging nonetheless. Would you live in a place like this? One of the residents of the multi-stories at Dundasvale says to me that in London or New York you can pay millions for a high-rise flat. But Scotland is different, and she's right. Cities like London and Liverpool and others in the UK have renovated and reclaimed a lot of their modernist buildings, and they've become desirable places to live and attract a range of people. But in Scotland, which was at the forefront of the revolution, remember, the great modernist council housing of the 60s has never lost the stigma it attracted when some of the estates became the focus of social problems. Why else would we have pulled down the flats at Winford this year? Some will blame Margaret Thatcher's council house sell-off of the 80s for the problem, for creating good estates and bad ones. And there's some truth in it, but the potential still exists in the modernist architecture we have left. One of the residents at Dundasvale tells me a group of them have formed their own tenants' council to campaign for improvements. Councils and housing associations should also aim for as broad a mix of residents as possible, and maybe the rest of us could check our attitudes. You might think Dundasvale and other places like it are brutalist or problematic or even ugly, but we should try and remember a simple fact. It's not really the buildings that are to blame. That article was written by Mark Smith and read to you by Elizabeth. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 15th of December 2025, from the Voices section. £3 billion outsourcing scandal draining Scotland's public services. Article written by Ros Foyer, STUC General Secretary. A new report from Scotland's largest trade union body has revealed a £3 billion outsourcing scandal at the heart of Scotland's public services. STUC General Secretary and Herald columnist Ros Foyer says the Finance Secretary must stop the rot of profiteering through the services that matter to the public. Next month, the Scottish Parliament will debate a budget that ministers insist will involve difficult choices. It's language we've heard time and time again. While I don't dispute there are difficult choices ahead, too often that language is an attempt to rob working people of their agency in an effort to present spending cuts as inevitable. But a major new report commissioned by the STUC and written by the Association for Public Service Excellence, APSE, tells a different story. Scotland is not short of money. We're being drained of money via a decades-long model of outsourcing and profiteering within our public services that is now costing us between £2 and £3 billion every single year. Put simply, The money is there for our public service. It just ends up being extracted by multinational companies and private finance. We've all seen how under pressure our public services are. We all know the Russian roulette system of getting a GP appointment or trying to get seen by the dentist. At a time when our NHS, local councils, social care system and schools are all stretched to breaking point, this report lays bare the scale of the leak at the bottom of the bucket. Scotland spends more than £16 billion a year buying services from external providers. Conservatively, about 10% of this, £1.6 billion, leaks out through profit margins. But once you factor in the more hidden forms of extraction, debt acquisition, sale and leaseback arrangements, refinancing gains, head office fees and inflated executive salaries, the leakage approaches £2 to £3 billion annually. Billions that could be funding nurses, social care workers, cleaners, teachers and local government staff. Billions that could be keeping the lights on in community centres, libraries and lighting up our parks to allay the safety of women. Billions that could be used to fully staff and fully fund the services people rely on every day. Billions that could be used to end the pay and pension discrimination that low-paid, predominantly female, outsourced workers face compared to directly employed public workers. Instead, that money is lining the pockets of major investors, private equity firms, and multinational corporations, many of whom are not based in Scotland, do not pay their fair share of tax here, and show little interest in reinvesting their profits into supporting the well-being of communities in Scotland. To any reasonable person, I would imagine this would elicit a sense of outrage and cries that the system is broken. Now, of course, it is. But it's working perfectly well for the people it's designed for, the profiteers. Nothing illustrates this more clearly than social care. Today, 79% of care home places in Scotland are privately owned, many by huge corporate chains backed by global finance. More than 20% of all income in the care system leaks out through profit and financial engineering before a single penny reaches the front line. Profits are made whilst workers, particularly women, suffer the consequences. Women make up 83% of the social care workforce and 74% of council workers. They are disproportionately pushed into outsourced roles where they face lower pay, weaker pensions and more insecurity. Social care workers in the private sector are paid an average of £1.60 an hour less than social care workers in the public sector. It isn't just the workers that lose out either. Service users are negatively impacted too. Staffing resources are significantly lower and complaints are significantly higher in private social care than they are in public social care. The Scottish Government's Fair Work ambitions mean little if our care system continues to funnel public money upwards into private profit while pushing thousands of women down towards in-work poverty. The central myth used to justify outsourcing is that it saves money. The evidence could not be clearer. It does not. In fact, 50 years of marketisation has delivered no reduction in the size of the state, no noticeable tax savings, and no improvement in public service quality. What it has delivered is a fragmented system where accountability is blurred, local economies are weakened, and wages and pensions are eroded. At budget time, the Finance Secretary must not ignore these findings. Every time cuts are proposed, cuts to teachers, cuts to community services, cuts to essential council staff, the Scottish Government must ask itself a simple question. Why are we cutting services when we could be cutting profiteering instead? And we must ask ourselves the question, why are we letting them get away with it? There is no justification for reducing public spending when billions are being lost through outsourcing. The Finance Secretary does not need to make cuts, therefore. She needs to make choices. Outsourcing is a false economy and it is hollowing out the very services Scotland needs to thrive. Our message to the Scottish Government is clear. There can be no meaningful public service reform while profiteering runs rampant throughout the sector. We must stop the rot. As we approach both the Scottish budget and the Holyrood election, political silence on outsourcing is no longer acceptable. Scotland cannot rebuild its public services on a foundation that leaks billions to private profiteers. If ministers are serious about prevention, about fair work, about tackling inequality, and about building a well-being economy, then insourcing must become the rule, not the exception. Direct public delivery must be the starting point, not the option of last resort. We can fully fund Scotland's public services. We can fully staff them. We can fully remunerate the workers who are the backbone of our communities, but only if we stop the great outsourcing drain at its source. It's time to choose people over profit. It's time to end the extraction economy. It's time for government to make Scotland's public services truly public and put them back in the hands of the people of Scotland. Ros Foyer is General Secretary of the STUC. The article was read to you by Elizabeth.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Q&Review and to tell your friends about our service.